Tell me your stories, let them exist. Turn off the spotlight for a single minute. I'm angry and I am not sorry, 'cause I'm in the dark for most of it. A highly elliptical orbit. I'm angry and I am not sorry. We don't need permission anymore. We don't need permission anymore. Stand back and watch us take the floor, coming through the front door. We don't need permission anymore. We don't need permission anymore. Stand back and watch us take the floor, coming through the front door tonight.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
It's working. Can we hear him?
Hello.
Oh, anyway,
Can you hear me now?
you can hear him now. It's seamless, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. Go on then. It's your line.
I'm
Rehearse
Justin,
this. And I'm Nathan.
and we're Incandescent.
And we're here to celebrate the launch of Mainstream. So, whilst those glasses still have something in them, and those of you at home on the Zoom, raise whatever receptacle you happen to have to hand, and we'll have a toast to the anthology and all who sail within.
To Mainstream. Cheers, everyone.
To Mainstream. And now, you'll be pleased to know we are not going to keep up the double act for the rest of the show, and I'm now going to hand you over to Justin.
Oh, you said there would be a stand, didn't you?
To do some thank yous.
Well, can you put that down there? Because that's just too much for me to handle. That's better. I still don't think this is on. It is. Okay. Right, I'm searching for my trusty piece of paper because I don't want to miss anyone out. Okay, so first of all, we have to say thank you to Matthew Clayton and everyone at Unbound, and everyone who supported the project, to Ruth Harrison at Spread the Word, Tim MacArthur and James, the trusty technician who's in the room somewhere. Thank you. And everyone else at Above the Stag tonight. Sophie O'Neill and everyone at our distributors, Impress. It's so dark in here, I can't see anyone. Oh, there he is. To Joe, who's taking photographs tonight, and he designed our wonderful cover. Yes. Sadly, Andy Pisanu can't be here tonight, but I want to say a huge thank you to him for composing, writing, and producing the wonderful music that you just heard on the backing track, that thunderous outsider anthem. And it's called Permission, so please support independent music making and download it and stream and do whatever you do these days. Thank you to our reading team, Alia Gulmani, Keith McDonnell, Angelica Kersey, and Alex Hopkins. To Lisa Goodrum for proofing the book. For Darren Kay, our copywriter. To Kathy Burke, Ashley Hickson-Lovance, Cash Carraway, and Sean Delenti for taking the time to read the book and for giving us such wonderful endorsements. To Hannah Schrader, who's here tonight, for coordinating this wonderful event. Where's Hannah? Thank you, Hannah, so much. You're amazing. To Sarah Louise Alsop, who promoted the event. To our film crew at the back, Tessa Garland, thank you very much. To our BSL interpreters, Amy and Ali. And to our marketing guru, Force of Nature, Sam Missingham, who sadly can't be here tonight. And I believe that's it. But there's one more person to thank. This couldn't have been possible without my lovely Nathan. Thank you. I don't think we could have done it without each other, though there have been a lot of cat fights. for probably the last 18 months. But I love him dearly, and thank you so much, Nathan. Over to you. Okay.
Justin David, whose idea it all was, and that there have been times in the last few years when I have liked to remind him of that. So before we get on with this evening's show, I'm just going to go back to the reasons behind the book's inception a few years ago. So we're both writers, we both have stories in mainstream, and in 2016 we founded Incandescent because we got tired of the icy shoulders of publishers, and we decided to seize the power of production and take it into our own hands. And it soon became apparent that ours were not exactly the only voices that were being tuned out by mainstream publishing. In fact, there was a report last year, seems longer ago, but it was just last year, from Spread the Word, the bookseller, and Goldsmiths, specifically in relation to the paucity of opportunities within the publishing industry for black and brown writers. So we wanted to address that in this book, and, you know, we're both gay, and perhaps less obviously, we both come from pretty working class families, and so we also wanted to address the lack of representation in publishing for LGBT writers and for writers from less affluent backgrounds. So we decided to bring all those three together in solidarity in one anthology, and the rest is history. So back, I think, to the present presentation. So we have 6 readers, all of whom have stories in the anthology. We have 6 readers for you this evening, 6 delicious fillings sandwiched between some films from some of the writers who sadly couldn't be here, starting with Bidisha.
Hi, I am Bidisha and I'm one of the authors in the mainstream anthology. It's a real pleasure and an honour to be part of such a varied and interesting group of contributors. My piece is called The Initiation, and above all I wanted to be part of a project that gives a voice to the voiceless and uncovers unheard stories and unseen scenes. It was such a joy and a pleasure to be invited by the editors to contribute something, and also to just be creative and be part of something that's a little bit out of the mainstream but still super attractive. And I hope that in these strange times we're living in, collections of new contemporary short fiction are exactly what people need to ease themselves back into the habit of reading and of being inspired by other stories from all over the world. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I hope the launch goes really well. The book itself looks absolutely beautiful, and I know that I'm in the company of some of my favourite contemporary writers.
So let's meet the first of those writers, shall we? Not only is she a writer, she's also a creative director and a cultural broadcaster. You've probably heard her hanging out on Radio 4. But tonight, she's here at Above the Stag Theatre. Please welcome Gaylene Gould.
I think this is like the first time I've been out of my house in like a year. This is like, I can't think of a better reason to be out here. Thank you so much, Justin and Nathan and everyone involved in this. And particularly Justin for dragging me back from all the things I have to do to make money, essentially, and which means I don't get to write as much as I should. And that, I think, is part of the reason why this anthology is really important, because those of us voices who need to be heard often can't because we're having to do lots of other things. So this story, this spinny, is to all the little girls I went to school with who were left behind and who I could have treated better. On that first day of the last year of primary school, Elaine walks Toki across the wide playing fields. Their hands are stuffed into their respective pockets. Toki keeps hers out of reach of her mother's. Elaine prevents hers from running through her daughter's soft curls. Elaine nods towards the tight knot of treetops poking above the school roof and says, perhaps for the last time, "One of those trees back there is alive because of your mum." Toki's eye roll is evident in her reply. "I know, Mum. You and Angie Kane watered your tree long after everyone else stopped watering theirs. Now I'm in my last year. Do you think I'll get to plant a tree in the spinney?" The shards of green in her daughter's hazel eyes can still surprise Elaine. Her stomach tightens. Thankfully, the spinney is now off limits to the school children. "I doubt it, Tox. Tree planting was the kind of school project you were allowed to do when I was a kid. They can't sat a tree now, can they?" "Oh," Toki says, kicking a stone with her bright trainers that took an hour to choose in the shop. "I won't get to see the witch then." Elaine lets the pause lengthen. 30 years on, the story of the witch survived, and Elaine still hasn't told her daughter that it's her fault the witch even appeared all those years ago. Now Toki has come of age, Elaine knows that it's time to tell her the truth. Just as she opens her drying mouth, a boy bounces past them. It's the way he slows down, that gacky smell of hair product. "All right, Tox," he says. "All right, Jamie." It's the way the blush sweeps her daughter's cheek and how the boy tears off without acknowledging her adult presence that makes Elaine ask sharply, "Who's that?" "Oh, that's just Jamie. He's in my class." The panic rises swiftly in Elaine. She wants to remind her daughter how careful she has to be now that her legs have grown coltishly long and the new fleshy buds have appeared on her chest. She wants to stress how the patch of pale pink blood that appeared in her panties a whole year before time has irrevocably changed Toki's life. She wants to say she must never enter those woods, but Toki breaks free to join her backing singers as Elaine calls the band of friends waiting by the school's front doors. "See you later, Mum." Toki throws up a hand and skips away. Elaine feels as if Toki is taking a piece of her own flesh with her. She wants to throw herself over her daughter like a fire blanket, but Toki is already cocooned in the nest of cooing girls. Elaine reassures herself with the fact that Toki is not the child Elaine had once been. Toki, with her long twisting curls which grow Beyonce blonde in the summer, is the one the others trail. For a moment, Elaine feels a familiar hollow ache return. She is suddenly as she was at Toki's age, standing stooped shoulders, with an untamable afro, the back of her skirt riding high on her ample behind, watching the shiny, colourful group of light-skinned girls walk away from her. Elaine is left with a dark line of treetops beckoning above the roof. She turns with a flick of her long, silky weave and imagines she catches the muggy scent of blackened soil and the ancient musk of tree bark. Angie Kane had smelt of stale socks, ones that had been worn for days without being washed. She walked past Elaine's hedge every day, and Elaine found herself straining at the kitchen window to catch the top of Angie's sparrow-like head. Elaine couldn't be seen to rush out to meet Angie. It had to look as though she had just happened to leave the house at the same time. That way, there would be no evidence of her actually befriending her. "All right, Angie? All right, Elaine?" Angie's smile creased her narrow, freckled face. It was as if she was the size of a normal girl, but then had been sucked away somehow. Malnourished, Elaine's mum, a nurse, had diagnosed after catching sight of Angie. Elaine was shocked because she thought only pleading-eyed African children on those adverts were malnourished, and Angie was white, and this was England. "Did you see the colour of Mrs. Prendergast's face when Paulie Bryant called her a silly bitch yesterday?" Angie opened her tiny beak mouth and let out a surprisingly deep guttural laugh, which turned the heads of the other children crossing the playing fields. Elaine ducked her own head into her coat collar. "Paulie Bryant's got a big fat arse. He wants to be careful that someone don't put their foot in it one day," Angie added, and Elaine laughed. As if summoned, Paulie Bryant swept by in his BMX bike and slapped Angie on the top of her head, the force causing her to stumble. "Shit stains, Angie," he shouted at her. Angie quickly righted herself. "Wouldn't want to see the size of your shit stains, fat arse." Now everyone was looking at them, which made Elaine want to disappear. Instead, she asked, "You okay?" Angie acted cartoon dizzy for a minute, sticking out her tongue and wobbling before sashaying towards the school doors. The children were never usually allowed in the spinney behind the school. They had a playground and playing fields lined with willow trees and that swept the ground and made for perfect pretend houses. But that day was different. That day, Mr. Randall, their bearded mammoth of a teacher, led them outside to the baby trees, sporting nappies made out of plastic bags. Listen, Mr. Randall's Yorkshire boom silenced the excited chatter. Get yourself in pairs, someone you like, because together you're going to take one of these saplings and it'll be your job to plant, water and tend your tree together. Shoes scuffled as friends paired with friends. Elaine made sure not to show relief when Angie finally found a way over. Our tree will grow bigger than any of theirs, Angie said. They entered the spinney behind the school in snake formation and climbed the small incline that led into the wood. The ground crackled dryly beneath their feet until they were plunged into a shady tangle of trees. There the ground let up a mossy smell. The cool air smelt thick and tangy. The children quietened like they're in a holy place. They planted the saplings on a patch of neglected scrub in the middle of the spinney. Mr. Randall helped them wet the ground, and then each pair scored out a bottle-deep hole with a trowel. Elaine watched Angie on all fours, digging her already grubby hands into the mud. Elaine couldn't imagine what her own mum would say if she were to come home dirty like that, so instead she stood and held the naked sapling and waited for Angie to finish. When Angie finally dug their tree's resting place, she looked up at Elaine and smiled. Her cheeks were flushed and her hair speckled with dirt. The girls ceremoniously lowered the tree into the hole, and Elaine squatted down too to pull the rich, cool earth about the roots. Every lunchtime after that, Angie and Elaine would fill an old white basin with water and gently carry it out into the spinney to douse the ground around the tree. At first, they were joined by other eager pairs of children, each boasting how their tree was taller and prettier than the others. But as the summer progressed and the children began to realise, with some resentment, that nature's infuriating clock meant trees grew by the year and not the day, the pairs began to drop off. Elaine wished she could drop off too. She and Angie weren't real friends after all. Penny Dougal and Sharon Lane were her friends now, but like clockwork, every lunchtime, Angie showed up with a white basin and that eager expression. Elaine agonised over how to tell Angie that she didn't want to water the tree anymore. She wanted to play normal girl games like hopscotch and skipping and mums and dads with Penny and Sharon, because at last she had been invited to play. She didn't know how to say this to Angie, the girl who would never be invited. When the two girls rounded the back of the school together on the hottest day of that year, Elaine did not know that this would be the last time. Thank you, everybody.
Gaylene Gould. Thank you, Gaylene. Right, next stop, Czech Republic. Come in, Kerry Hudson.
Hi there, absolutely gutted that I can't be there tonight due to small matters such as a global pandemic and my baby, but I'm joining you from my kitchen in Prague just to say huge congratulations to everyone involved in this anthology. It has been so incredibly thoughtfully produced by Inkandescent. And I especially want to congratulate the emerging writers, some of whom I know through other projects. I'm sincerely so proud to sit alongside the work in the anthology. So thank you for that opportunity. Have a bowl tonight, and I will raise a glass of Czech pivo from across the waters to you all.
Thank you, Kerry. So those emerging writers that Kerry mentions, they were chosen by open submission. We had a lot of submissions and we had a lot of good ones, but we had surprisingly few disagreements when it came to making our final decisions. And I think we made good decisions, not simply for the quality of their writing, but also for their sheer enthusiasm, which has at times been the only thing keeping us going. So some of those writers are here in the room this evening, and I should like to bring your attention to them. Now, writers, if you don't want the attention, just keep your head down. if you do, stand, wave, bow, do a glory lap of the room wearing a mask, of course. So we have Alex Hopkins. Who else? We've got Louise Zed. Neil Lawrence. Ollie Charles. And our next reader now, so he's an alumni of the London Writers' Awards, winner of the Creative Future Writers' Awards. He is Iqbal Hussein.
Hi there. Okay, so is it too short? Thank you very much. So my short story is based on stories that my mum used to relate to us as children. Not quite fairy tales, scary tales I call them. And this is based on a typical myth in the Asian culture of banshee-like spirits who have feet which point in the other way. So in all other respects, they look like women, and apart from their feet. So here we go. The Reluctant Bride. As he drives past the Haveli, his mother's warnings flit through his head. Don't relieve yourself under a tree at night, you might disturb a jinn. Never bathe after sunset, who knows what spirits you'll attract. The feet of a charail point backwards. The burnt-out mansion has lain empty for decades, unloved by buyers and shunned by locals. The crumbling towers and minarets loom like pitchforks against the near full moon, while bats wheel in and out of the shutterless windows. He detects movement through the gates, and his hand clutches the thouise around his neck before remembering he lost it years ago. Devoid of its protection, he touches his earlobes instead. As he navigates the country roads, he drums his dashboard and launches into an old film song, his nasal tones cutting through the foot of the engine. Having plied his trade at night for so long, he would struggle with the madness of the day. Even in these small hours, he finds passengers, a broken-down car, a partygoer missing his last bus, an urgent dash to the hospital. The money may not be much, but he lives simply. Something large darts across his path. What the? He swerves, mounting the pavement, straight for a pair of ornamental wrought iron gates. The Haveli. Distracted by his singing, he has somehow ended up here again. He slams the brake and releases the handlebars. The steering column jabs into his chest. Smoking agarbatti and assorted talismans litter his interior. All is silent, apart from a high-pitched tingling deep inside his ears. Then, with a rush, he returns to the land of the living. He tentatively unfurls himself, and the horn stops blaring. Before he can inspect himself, he is arrested by a sound that chills his flesh, a woman sobbing. He shakily swings his legs out of the driver's seat. Peering across the road, he sees nothing but endless fields of corn rippling in the wind. "Hello," he calls out. "Corn hai, aap theek ho?" The crying ceases. From a distance, the lowing of an ox carries through the air like the plea of a dying man. Then a figure emerges from behind a giant peepal tree, stepping into a shaft of moonlight. For the second time that night, he stops breathing. Before him is a woman in full bridal dress. A highly decorated red dupatta cowls her head. She is bedecked with gold. A tikka sunburst pendant over her forehead, a nose chain across her cheek, swathes of necklaces around her throat. In the cold light, her scarlet gown is the colour of dried blood. He remembers stories about these charails resting under peepal trees, how they lure the unsuspecting by hiding their ghastly features in the guise of an attractive woman, sometimes a man. Her face is in shadow. He glances down, but her legs and feet are swathed in the folds of a lenga. As she approaches him, she stumbles, throwing her arms out and sending her gold bangles clattering. Her hands are withered and burned. He flinches and she draws back. Guilt floods through him. My mother, may Allah be merciful upon her soul, would not let me leave you here. Please come. She opens her palms and shows that they are empty. What he thought were burns are in fact elaborate patterns drawn in henna. He gathers her meaning. No, 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 no. I wouldn't dream of it. She scans the road. He reassures her they are the only ones abroad at this hour. He understands it isn't proper for a lone woman to be in a vehicle with a strange man at any time, let alone at night. With a lengar concealing her feet, she glides towards him. Halfway across, she stops, pressing the back of her hand to her mouth, her sniffs replaced by a gasp. He turns away. It has been many years since he has made use of a looking glass, but he knows what she sees. He calls over his shoulder. Sister, please, it is not safe. You don't know who you might meet. He swallows an urge to add, or what?
Iqbal Hussein. Thank you, Iqbal. So our emerging writers came from all around the UK, and some of them couldn't be with us here in London today. Hannah, are they with us on the Zoom, any of them?
Paula
See-
says yes, capital letters.
See, I've got the easy job up here hosting the live show. Hannah is actually hosting the Zoom experience at the back there. Who else have we got, Hannah?
We've got Chris and Giselle and Kathy. They're all saying hello.
Hey, hello. So that is just to recap on what Hannah said. So let's call their names out. They are Polis Louisu, Giselle Lieb, Hedy Hume, Chris Simpson, Aisha Phoenix. Is Aisha with us?
Yes.
She is. Aisha's just had a baby. And Kathy, who Hannah already mentioned, who is the star of our next movie.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic time tonight. I'm really sorry I can't be there in person. I would have loved to have met you all. I'm so proud to be part of Mainstream. It means such a lot to have a story of mine written in my own working class regional voice included in something so brilliant. Thanks so much to Nathan and Justin and everyone at Inkandescent for bringing this brilliant anthology together. You've shown us that all of our voices are valid, and there are people out there who really do want to listen to our stories. So keep shouting loud and proud, everyone. Cheers. Have a great night.
Thank you, Kathy. So it's time for our last reader in this first half of the show. She's also a reader at Birkbeck. She's a poet, an essayist, a novelist. I don't know how you find time for it all. She is Julia Bell.
I actually just want to start by making a massive, massive vote of thanks to these two guys here. Anybody that's ever done any kind of publishing work, and I've published quite a few anthologies in my time, will know what a massive pain in the ass it is to organise this many people into a book and do all of the fiddly admin that it takes to make something like this happen. So I just want to say thank you to both of you, and I just want a big round of applause, guys. Thank you. Really. Because, you know, this stuff actually really matters. And I remember publishing a book when I was quite young called Hard Shoulder, which was a collection of short stories from Birmingham. And quite a lot of people in that anthology are now published and successful writers. And we did a similar kind of thing. And it's a really big deal. So thanks a lot. Anyway, this is my contribution. It's a story I wrote during lockdown. It's a neighbour story about neighbours, unsurprisingly then. Although it's not about the pandemic itself, actually, and it's called The Birdwatchers. And I'm just going to read the beginning. After sex, warm and stretched and feeling alive again, they took their breakfast in the garden. Elise and her partner Mira often enjoyed sunny summer mornings on the deck that faced onto the small private garden of their apartment. A plot that Elise had gently tended over many years, overhung with fragrant jasmine and clematis. Consequently, they never took much notice of the neighbours. On one side was a Turkish couple who mostly used the garden for laundry or barbecuing kebab, and given that they couldn't understand what they were saying, it was easy to phase out the music of their voices. On the other side, the ground floor flat had been empty for months, the collateral in a messy divorce, and the garden was overgrown, brambles and nettles creeping under the fence. So it was a surprise then, as they sat with their sweet tea, naked under their thin robes, ready like cats to enjoy their coiled moment of satisfaction, to hear the sound of voices on the other side of the fence. Speaking English, she caught a word or two, popular, contract, and then the loud drawl of the estate agent. Of course, the garden could do with a little work, but it's a blank canvas. Mira raised her eyebrows and shifted in her seat. Something about the loudness and the proximity intruded on their privacy, and somehow the relaxing moment was lost, causing Elise an irritation that lasted most of the day. A few days later, when taking out the rubbish, Elise saw a large white removal van parked in the street outside. She lingered at the gate in case she could glimpse whoever was moving. Over the low dividing wall, she could see the front window next door, and as she turned to go back indoors, she thought she caught the flicker of movement, the blur of the drop of a curtain, a ripple of fabric. She shivered and nodded in the direction of the movement, feeling a bit stupid for being caught at the gate being nosy. Over the course of the next few days, where there had once been silence, there was suddenly the noise of people living, thumps of furniture being moved, muffled laughter. Elise noticed it at first, and then it sank into the background, and she didn't think about next door again until the weekend, which was Mira's birthday. The weather was warm and sunny, so after a lazy few hours in bed, Elise got up and laid out the table in the garden for brunch, while Mira took a shower. She carefully arranged the table with a vase of freshly cut flowers from the garden, presents in an artful pile. She took a photo and posted it to Instagram, wishing her beloved a happy birthday so everyone could see #blessed. Everything was so pretty and so perfect, she concluded, spooning coffee into the cafetiere. When Mira came out of the shower, she took a photo of her too. Not so early, God, you're obsessed with Instagram. I'm just happy, that's all. Mira sucked her teeth and turned her attention to the pile of presents. What the hell's this? Mira held up a long box, which had been delivered by UPS a few days earlier. I've no idea. Sanchez sent it, I think. Mira's cousin worked in Silicon Valley and every now and then would send them expensive new technology. At Christmas, it was an Apple Watch. Before that, a Fitbit. After taking them out of the box and playing with them for a bit, the novelty usually wore off and they lay abandoned around the apartment. Oh, God, Mira groaned. It's one of those voice-controlled things. Alexa, Elise recognized it. Why are digital assistants always women? Mira tutted and opened the box. Sanjay does this to me on purpose. He thinks I'm frightened of technology, so he sends me these things to make me deal with it. I'm not frightened of it. I just don't like it. There's a difference. But they amused themselves nonetheless, plugging in the speaker and trying to get it to work. Alexa, play Björk, Mira said. I'm sorry, I don't understand, the disembodied voice echoed across the garden. She repeated the instructions to the same response. She doesn't understand my accent. She's racist. No, it's how you pronounce Björk. It's not supposed to sound like you just puked. Oh, whatever, Björk, Mira tutted and waved Elise away. Alexa, what's your favourite sexual position? She said a bit louder. Sorry, I didn't understand that. She's a virgin, Mira giggled, sipping her coffee. Exactly at that moment, a loud sneeze from the other side of the fence made them both jump. Shit, Mira covered her mouth. Alexa, play some jazz, Elise said, and quickly the sound of Miles Davis covered their blushes. But they sat there for a few seconds without speaking, a little disconcerted. The sneezing was followed by rustling, then the sound of vigorous scraping and scratching, the crisp ring of metal against stone. Whoever was next door was doing the garden. Close to the house, the fence was high and overgrown with climbers, so it was impossible to see who was on the other side. But the panels towards the end of the garden were lower and topped with trellis, which meant it was perfectly possible to look through into next door. Elise resisted the temptation to go to the bottom of the garden to look. Over the following weeks, Elise continued her work at a busy family law firm, Mira teaching her undergraduate classes and writing poetry. The weather was unseasonably rainy, so they didn't spend much time in the garden. But Elise noticed that bags of garden clippings accumulating by next door's front gate, bramble stems snaking out of the top of the bags. Also, there were suddenly a lot more birds in the back garden. First the small birds, the sparrows, the blue tits, the blackbirds, then the bigger, louder birds, magpies, crows, some moronic pigeons, and a couple of screechy parrots, all lined up along the fence, taking an interest in the garden next door. Then one morning a flock of starlings descended on the gardens in a screeching cloud, distracting them from their breakfast. Ew, what the hell? Elise stood up and clapped her hands to try and startle the birds. She didn't mind a variety, but she minded the flocks. There was something pestilent about so many of them, fluttering together all at once over the garden. So much movement made the air turbid and hyperactive. She went to the end of the garden and peered over the fence. She saw that the garden next door was indeed cleared, and that a bird food station had been rigged in the centre of the lawn. It looked industrial, cages of peanuts and fat balls hanging off its branches like the parts of an infernal machine. Maybe I should have a word, Elise said. It looks like an aviary over there. And say what? I'm sorry, but you can't feed the birds. But it's not healthy, all that bird shit. Mira shook her head. At home we have a saying, you should not have an argument with a crocodile if you're living in the water. You think they're crocodiles? Mira shrugged. Well, we don't know, do we? It's London. What do we know about our neighbours? Thank you.
Julia Bell. Thank you, Julia. So that's the interval. If you are here in the room and you haven't yet purchased your book, Hannah has some up the back. And if you are at home on Zoom, there's always Amazon. We'll see you back here in 15. Thank you very much. Hello again, welcome back. So I hope you, those of you who are here in the room, have had a little chance to mingle, to get to know each other. Hannah, what's happening on the Zoom?
Well, everybody is giving their vast congratulations, and they're very excited about each story. I do have to read Chris's comment, though, about Julia's reading. He says, well, I just stood up to tell my neighbors to keep the music down when I discovered that Julia had set the Alexa off in my bedroom. We've also got Damien just expressing how it is so thrilling seeing a room with people in it. So they're all very...
It is thrilling, let me tell you.
But yes, everyone is having a lovely time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Hannah. So one of the keys to getting our magic carpet elevated in the first place was getting some of our established writers on board, and we're very, very grateful to them. One of them was this next gentleman. It's Paul McVeigh from Ireland.
Hello everyone, hope you're all enjoying the launch, and I wanted to say thank you to Justin and Nathan for inviting me to be part of the anthology. Congratulations to you too, because I know how much hard work goes into making an anthology behind the scenes that people really don't see, and well done on all of that and creating something full of such great stories. And a special shout out to all the new writers whose work is in the anthology. Well done, all of you, and I hope it's the start of many, many more things to come for you in exciting days, and I look forward to seeing all your novels on the shelves. All right, have a great night. Bye.
Thank you, Paul. So we have some other writers in the room that I would like to bring your attention to. We have Jonathan Kemp. We have Lisa Goldman. We did have Neil McKenna, but he's got a migraine and he's had to shoot off home to lay down with his pussies, apparently. So let's bring to the stage our next reader. Her short story collection, The Ministry of Guidance, has just been longlisted for the Polari Prize. It's Golnoosh Nour.
Hi everyone. Hello. Can you hear me well? I'm just going to read from the beginning of my short story in this stunning anthology, and doesn't really need much introduction. The only thing is it's from the point of view of a 16-year-old girl, as you will see. And I'm afraid you might have to imagine me as a 16-year-old girl. So I hope that's not too difficult to do. But yeah, it's called Happy Ending. This is my first trip outside of Iran. I'm happy once we're off the plane. The air hosts were so hostile they literally threw the food at us. It is midnight, and we are finally at the terminal of Jeddah Airport. For the first time in my life, I am in an Arabic chador, which makes me feel that I look like a demented bat. And yet, I can feel people's glances. These glances, heavy as a baton, follow me all the way to passport control. I presume because I am the only 16-year-old on the flight. An insane-looking guy is shouting into a mic, warning us not to carry drugs. And then we wait in a queue for 3 hours. By we, I mean me, my parents, and 1,000 smelly oldies. But truth be told, I am very excited, not just because I can finally see the house of God, but because I like traveling and seeing new places. Everybody says this irreligious city hates us Iranians more than all the other cities in Saudi Arabia. After 5 hours of queuing for immigration, an old man faints. When it's my turn, the passport officers look at me as though they want to purchase me. My mother telling me, "Correct your hijab, your hair is showing." I don't think the officer minds my hijab as he's pronouncing my name as though he were singing a pop song. Faiza, while shaking his head, flashing a row of crooked yellow teeth that make me feel nauseated. After that, we board a bus to the holy city of Medina. I try to remember stuff from school about Prophet Muhammad's victories here. Sadly, my mind is blank. The bus driver is driving so fast, I think I might vomit any second. The thought of being smashed to bits in a bus in the middle of a desert makes me feel even worse. Passengers whisper that the bus driver is a Paki and that's why he drives like a Haywoon. I'll never figure out why Haywoon is an insult. Animals are cute, far cuter than most people. The only thing our tour leader, Mr. Eslami, does is to salawat in a mic. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, saying hello to the Prophet Muhammad and his family. I wonder if the Prophet is watching us. So I keep accompanying Mr. Eslami sending salawats until I am half conscious in the tremors of our bus and the monstrous chatter of the passengers, my head on my mother's shoulder. But when it is night time, the dark makes me feel awake again. The passengers are no longer talking. I can hear some of them snore like giants. I widen my half-open eyes and encounter the most beautiful scene I've ever seen in my life, the glittery sky of the desert. I fall into the deepest slumber ever. I dream about my school friend, Layla, who snickered when I informed her I was going to Mecca with my parents. She said I should avoid those crocodile-eating Arabs and stay in Tehran, turning our house into a party den with her and her secret boyfriend, Arash. The truth is, Arash creeps me out more than all these chador-wrapped passengers, but I tolerate his existence because sometimes when Layla and I are alone, we cuddle, our bodies rubbing subtly against one another, and I don't want these moments to end. When my father taps my feet and wakes me up, I am dreaming of Layla telling me she killed Arash, and I need to help her bury him. And I'm looking for the least suspicious place in a God-forsaken garden for Arash's burial. I vividly see Layla's lips shine, plumped up thanks to her new lip gloss, the one that got her expelled from school for a day. We arrive at Medina after 2 hazy days on the bus. As soon as we arrive in our 3-star hotel, I return to my death-like slumber. You have slept enough. Everybody is performing ghusl now. My dad exclaims. I notice he's wet and naked with only a white robe around his waist concealing his private parts. I sit on the bed and look at my mother who is standing beside my father staring at me. She's in a white chador, so white it is blinding me. They look like ghosts. Get up, time for ghusl, she tells me as though I do not already know my task. We have to be in the hotel lobby for prayers and then the mosque in 15 minutes. My ghusl revives me. I happily wrap my white chador around my wet body. You look like an angel, my father says. And we head to the lobby where we meet all our fellow pilgrims. We pray collectively until I find myself yawning. My mother is secretly punching me through her chador. An old man announces, it has always been my wish to say azan in Medina before I die. Mr. Eslami responds, please do. He is singing his azan, but seems so old that I think he might pass away in the midst of it. I worry his wish might not come true. Everybody apart from me is weeping. My mother manages to frown at me whilst crying. I try to shed at least one tear and succeed in doing two while staring at the sparkling grey tiles. When I feel the weight of someone's glance, I look up to catch a young woman staring at me. She and I are the only people who are not weeping. I almost smile at her, but manage to suffocate it. I don't want other people to think I am laughing at the old man's moving azan. Aren't you hungry? My mother asks me worriedly after the old man is done. I wonder what she'd tell me if I inform her of my feelings towards Layla. Does this woman know anything about me really, apart from how my stomach works? She is already gathering a good amount of jahas for me, television, floral china, silver spoons, for my life with my future husband. I just hope he won't be as creepy as Arash, otherwise my murderous dreams might come true. My father sometimes yells at her that he doesn't have the money to purchase things we do not need right away. But my mother always mumbles that the most suitable suitor will arrive as soon as I'm an 18-year-old university student. The thought of being a university student both scares and excites me. Before I know it, I am in the hotel's so-called restaurant, a tight canteen. Every pilgrim has to sit behind the same ginormous table. I quickly spot the young woman with whom I made eye contact. She is not in a chador. She looks like she's in her early 20s with her young husband, and I presume his parents. She's just wearing a manto and a headscarf like we normally do in Iran. Suddenly, our tour leader points at her. Everybody, including myself, turns our heads not to miss out on this most thrilling scene. And these are Mr. Eslami's exact words to her. The Arabs will abuse you. Imagining her response, I stop breathing. I am ashamed that I am praying for a fight. The bloodier, the better. Her screeching at him, plunging her long nails into his hairy neck, with other passengers getting involved. I hear my mother muttering, "Oh my God." However, the rebellious woman kills the suspense by completely blanking Mr. Eslami, as though our tour leader were nothing but an annoying dog barking under a tree. She isn't even looking at him and carries on chewing the greasy rice. This brutal dismissal makes me like her even more. I want to become like her. Later on, I listen to her complaining to her husband. This place is dirty. Her husband hisses at her, but she adds, "It actually stinks." I am not certain why, but her complaining words are a soothing melody to my ears. I know now Medina is interesting to me, mostly because of her. I look at her when we sit behind the table in the canteen. She doesn't confront me about my stares. Sometimes she looks back and smiles. I smile back. There is something about her that reminds me of Layla. They both seem like they want to tell me an exciting secret. And you can read the rest of this crazy story in the anthology. Thank you.
Golnoosh Nour. Thank you, Golnoosh. So I'd just like to name check a few more writers in the anthology who couldn't be here with us. There's Padrika Tarrant, Philip Ridley, Kit Duval, Keith Jarrett, happy birthday, Keith. And yes, that's all of them. But this next writer really wanted to be here with us this evening, but she is currently incarcerated. Such are the times in Greater Manchester. It is Elizabeth Baines.
Hi everyone. What a privilege it is to be involved in this really great project. It is wonderful to be actually invited to write about the kinds of experiences that are so often overlooked or silenced in society and in literature. And congratulations to everyone. Congratulations to the authors for their compelling and honest stories. It's really great to be in your company. And congratulations to Justin and Nathan for conceiving of the project and then bringing it to this buzzy fruition. Thank you to them for providing this platform. Anyone with any experience of being an outsider will cherish this anthology. Mine is very, very well thumbed. And everyone will find it a moving and compelling read.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So it's time for our next reader. Now, she is a filmmaker and a writer. Her first short story collection, Variations, is literally hot off the influx press. It is Juliette Jacks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you to Justin and Nathan for commissioning this story, which is called A Review of a Return. As the title implies, it's written as a film review of a film called A Return. I wrote it during lockdown. I returned to my hometown, and the story is about a film about someone returning to the hometown, which is the same hometown as my hometown. So I'm going to start reading. When Syntagma Journal asked if I wanted to review J.G. Singer's new film, an hour-long walk through their hometown in Surrey, shot on 60mm with Singer's narration and an ambient soundtrack, I was hesitant. I've long been interested in Singer's work, not so much because I share Spela Milanic's conviction, expressed in her review of Summer Days 2018, that Singer is the most promising queer experimental filmmaker in contemporary Europe, but because I knew Singer in our youth. That would not be a problem in many instances. I would happily interview Singer, who uses they-them pronouns, or include their work in any survey of recent queer film. But a review presents an ethical consideration, demanding objectivity as it does. In this case, I think it more interesting and potentially productive to write through this moral issue rather than to recoil from it, hence my accepting this commission. I hope that you, the reader, or listeners in this case, will indulge me, and I hope J.G. Singer will forgive me. With its title betraying the influence of great film diarists such as Jonas Mekas or David Perloff, A Return opens on a train. Set that up. The image flickers and fades in, awakening the viewer somewhere between Ellswood and Salfords on the London to Brighton line. With that characteristic 16mm light burn around the edges of the shot, Singer shows us the Royal Ellswood Hospital, or the Asylum for Idiots as it was called when it opened in 1853, the first purpose-built establishment for people with learning difficulties. Who knows how many horrors took place in this castle, reflects Singer, telling us about two cousins of the Queen who were hidden there and listed as dead in Burke's Peerage, decades before their actual deaths. Described by architectural critic Ian Nairn simply as, not nice. The listed building looms over the surrounding countryside and now serves as luxury flats, of course, with a Union Jack flying over the top, of course. A whitewashing of a complicated past that perhaps reveals more about a return than Singer intended. The film really begins when Singer gets off at Hawley Station, offers glimpses of the private company logos, and reminisces about British Rail despite being too young to remember it. Unlike their early works about London, where Singer moved as soon as I legally could, for a degree at Goldsmiths, naturally, the narration does not strive too hard for the effect of Patrick Keeler, noting simply that history does not happen here. But there are personal histories, and people with histories, as A Return explores. The first of these is quite amusing. Singer sees a man sat in a car waiting outside the station, picking his nose, who they immediately recognise as Mr. Norton, who threatened to expel me in year 10 because he thought I'd put glue in his coffee. I hadn't, but I think he just never liked me because he thought I was too feminine and a bit of a smart-ass. Then a lament. So did everyone else. At this point, the man in the car realises he's being filmed and angrily turns towards the camera. The shot ends abruptly, most likely with Singer running away like a naughty schoolchild. There are a few establishing shots to tell us more about what kind of town this is. A large Waitrose and an old but well-maintained department store. A sign for Hawley Tire and Exhaust that may well have inspired the pun that begins Sheena Mackay's 1986 novel Red Hill Rococo, set in the next town to the north, where the protagonist sees Red Hill Tires and Exhausts from the train. And the Big Wetherspoons pub in what was once a grand cinema back in the 30s. So far, so unremarkable. Singer takes us to the secondary school, the only one in the town, to poke at their memory further, having already set up an unhappy time there with that earlier anecdote. It's break time. Children are eating, talking, playing football or basketball, with the 5-storey tower block that hosts the science labs looming over the playground like the Royal Ellswood over the neighbouring villages. Perhaps I could have given this life more of a chance, as my parents were always telling me to, Singer wonders over the noise. I'd made my mind up to leave before my first day here, and so I grew up in exile in the only place I've ever called home. The camera shakes. Perhaps Singer did not use a tripod, as they wanted to be able to get away quickly if seen shooting, but the jerky effect conveys two things. The first is that this is not a major work, but one made quickly and cheaply when more ambitious or elaborate filmmaking is impossible. The second is the nature of Singer's personality, at least as an adolescent. Jittery, anxious, trying to assert their own opinions, tastes and desires, while being deeply concerned with peer acceptance, and struggling to work out how much of their gender nonconformity to display. We were in the same year at this school, both taking our GCSEs in 1998, and then going to Sixth Form College in Reigate, before I moved to Brighton and Singer to London. Singer talks about alienation, boredom and loneliness, leading to a deep-seated depression. I recall these feelings well as we shared them. How could we not, in a town like this, with its run-down high street, its lack of anything to do besides underage drinking and chasing the dragon at house parties, the constant fear of being beaten up by resentful teenagers with little to occupy them and less to hope for? Singer stops lingering on the playground and talks about the early 2000s, when they and other queer people took vicious abuse in a national moral panic that culminated in a mob in Newport driving a paediatrician out of her home, and an avalanche of complaints against Chris Morris's Brass Eye special on Channel 4, satirising the media's role in this campaign. They take a walk that we often did together, home from school, either over the rusty railway bridge or through the subway, which, Singer Riley tells us, inspired a song by local band The Cure that's 6 lines long. Wondering what became of the school bullies, and if they even want to know, Singer mentions a fight that they were supposed to have here 24 years ago with a boy from year 10 that I was later told got set up because I was, quote, bent. Wisely, Singer didn't show up, hiding at my house instead, not long after I'd become their only friend, and not long before I became rather more than that. Filming the trains from the bridge, Singer reflects on how often they left during their teens, partly because it was so easy to bunk the train fares back then, and on their permanent departure in 2000, which seemed to freeze the town's development in Singer's mind, almost as if it didn't exist when they weren't there. Hawley has changed, of course, but glacially compared to the nearest cities. Singer notes the Gatwick Islamic Centre, pointedly named after the nowhere place of the nearby airport, rather than a long-established town populated overwhelmingly by white middle-class people who always returned Conservative MPs and councillors, shown on a board in the centre. If Singer had kept up with local news, they might have heard about people vandalising the centre back in 2012 as worshippers observed Ramadan. They stop at a bookmaker's, which used to be a record shop in the 1990s, where the staff introduced us to the kind of artists whose work now make up the soundtrack for Singer's films: Ortega, Fenez, Mogwai, Underground Resistance, etc. Singer tells us briefly about The Only Thing in the Town I Ever Loved, and how it closed down when Tesco and then Amazon started selling CDs, and the shop couldn't keep flogging singles to kids on their way home from school to subsidise them selling weird electronic music to people like me. There's an air of smug superiority to this, coming from Singer's relief at successfully leaving a place without culture and becoming something like the person they wanted to be. They show us the old library, closed down and unoccupied, but not the larger one recently opened at the other end of the high street. But one doesn't have to know this to suspect that the filmmaker is more concerned with weaving a story about the self than about their surroundings. And if you want to know how the film ends, read and buy Mainstream. Thank you very much.
Juliette Jacks. Thank you, Juliet. So now, speaking of reviews, you may be shocked, but perhaps not surprised to know that you won't find a single review of this collection in a national newspaper. Not a single returned email yet. But this means that for now, at least, it is up to us to tell everyone about it. Social the fuck out of it. We are at Incandescent UK # Mainstream Anthology. Thank you. So we've got our final film, and we are off to Oz with DJ Connell.
Hi there, it's DJ Connell, Diane. I'm in Sydney. I can't make it to the launch. I wish you all the best with Mainstream. It's a great collection of short stories by some brilliant writers. It's wonderful that I'm included in the anthology, and I wish you all the best. Sorry I can't make it. Okay. Oh, there's my cat in the background. Prickles! Say hello.
And it goes without saying that our feline interns, Janae and Jeanette, very queer, very literary cats, they extend their deepest regards. So it's time for our final reader of the evening. He is not only a writer, but a theatre maker. His fourth, I think, book, Skin Lane, was shortlisted for the Costas. His next book, Address Book, is being published by us and will be launched here in this theatre on November the 4th. Remember it. It's Neil Bartlett.
Hello, everybody. One of the many things that I love about being part of this anthology is that cover graphic behind me, because it reminds me that word mainstream, which I've hated all my life because it's a shorthand way of telling people that some people matter and other people don't, that word mainstream can be altered by taking action and replaced with the word stream, which is fluid and irrigates and is delightful. I think the division between mainstream and stream happens in many ways. For all of us in this room, it can be imposed from outside, but often we internalize that imposition. We create our own exclusion from the mainstream, and we can and must abolish that. My story is a story I never thought I'd tell anyone. It happens in 1974, and the important thing about 1974 is that Neil was 15, and in August of 1974 he was picked up by a man called John in the toilets at Waterloo Station. John was working that day, and so we couldn't have sex, but he gave me his phone number and invited me back to his house. I didn't really know what that meant because I'd had lots of sex, but never in a house. I decided to phone John because it's 1974. Many of you are too young to know about this. That meant that I had to get on my bike, cycle across town so that no one who knew my parents would say, "We saw Neil in the phone box at the end of your road," but to go to the phone box which was furthest away from where we lived, hide my bike in a patch of long grass and press my coin into a hot little slot. And then, it's easy, he's telling me. If the trains from where you live all go through to Waterloo, he's saying, then all you have to do is change at Clapham Junction. Look up on the boards, he says, look up and find a train to Twickenham. And then, once you're safely on board, just sit tight and count 6 stops. Get off, cross the road. I'll be there in my car. And he's right. It is easy to start with. Walking towards him across the road outside the station is fine, but then when I climb into the car, the strap on the seatbelt is hot, like skin, and also I can feel John looking at me. I need to get something in between his face and mine, and so I stare straight out through the windscreen and start talking about school, about the train, and all the time I can see the sunshine outside. It's putting hard white edges around things and insisting that this is all actually happening. I can remember shifting in my seat to try and hide myself. I can remember my shirt sticking to my back. We turn left. There's a curve in the road lined with houses, and then there's a dual carriageway. There are some bright, dusty trees close by the road, traffic lights, and now we're turning left again because the light's gone green. And then suddenly there's a plane so close overhead that it seems to fill the whole of the windscreen. I duck, but John laughs. He tells me that his house here in Twickenham is right under the Heathrow flight path. Sometimes, he says, there are great queues of the things, whole rows of planes hanging up above his house like giant birds. But you get used to the noise. Then we turn left and right. And John says this is just round the back of where he lives, and before I'm quite ready, the car is parked. First, we're ducking under some kind of wooden arch or pergola, and then we're going onto a lawn that's dotted with young trees, and there's a neighbour doing watering with a hose. Because of the sunlight, the water turns into a spray of something else. Diamonds, I think they are. And this neighbour is waving, and he says, "Hello." But John doesn't miss a step. He waves right back as if all of this sunshine and me, 15-year-old me, walking just 2 paces behind him, is all absolutely ordinary. And I suppose I must have been looking down at my feet when he did that, because I'm noticing right now that the path across John's front lawn is made up of exactly the same sort of concrete slabs that we have in our front garden path at home, which also seems impossible. We turn left. There are shrubs and flowers, hydrangeas, geraniums, and now I must be looking up again because I can see that John's front door is painted black. John unlocks the door and then he stands aside. There's a step you have to take, he says, and it's right. He's right. There's a sort of step. You have to step out, up and over something to get inside John's house, a sort of raised threshold. And I can see this, but my feet won't move, except that now John is saying, you go first, and I'm saying, thank you. Inside, everything is dark. It's a bit too dark after all that dazzle and the sparkling water falling over that neighbour's flowers, and I can't quite make things out. I can see a dining table with too many chairs and also some sort of a big wooden chest or cabinet, something very large and locked looking, but I don't ask. I don't ask for any explanations, and then the noise of John putting down the car keys makes me come right back to myself. He goes first up the stairs. On the landing, there's the bathroom. John points that out in case I need it, I suppose. And then there's his spare room, the one we never went in. And then here at the end of the landing is the door to John's bedroom. Everything is white. White walls, white wardrobe doors, and there's a mirror that seems to have me already trapped inside it. Everything is a bit too close for comfort now we're in here, and it feels like our 2 bodies fill up the room entirely. There are some thin white curtains across the window by the bed, I notice, and they're moving very, very slowly. I can see fingers undoing buttons, but I'm not sure if this is John undoing me or me undoing him. Now, according to the mirror, we're taking off our trousers, and at this point I have to stop and turn away because John is bending over and taking off everything, and that is something else that I've never, ever seen before. I can feel a burning on my face and a spasm somewhere in my throat, and now I can feel the bedsheet. It's very cool, and it's smooth, and it's underneath my knees. The curtains are right next to me now. They're easily within reach should I want to stretch out a hand and stroke them. And I can see now that they're so close that they have shadows moving through them in waves. That's because the window itself has been left ajar, and their air that's coming in from outside feels sort of warm and cool both at the same time. John starts to touch me. On my foot, first of all, because now I'm lying on my back and John is standing at the bottom of the bed and he's looking at all of me, up and down. And I do try and look back at him. I really do try to do that, but I can't because of the burning on my face and because of what's happening in my throat. And so I turn my head and I watch those shadows moving through the curtains instead. They're moving very slowly, and the air that is touching them is touching me all over, I realize. And now finally, I do look up at John, and the first thing he does is smile. The first part of our lovemaking, I remember, happened in complete silence, but later on, I think after about 40 minutes, I can hear my 15-year-old self starting to make a lot of noise. I make sounds that I don't think I've ever made before, and they bewilder me. They arrive in the room without my even being sure that it's my throat that's making them. And I think I probably flounder a bit at this point and maybe even call out for help. When this happens, John doesn't stop. He's using his mouth on me now, and he's doing it better than anybody ever has before. Somewhere low down inside me, I am beginning to feel sensations that are too large to stay put. I can feel them getting impatient. They need to be acknowledged somehow. And as my back starts to arch, I realize these feelings or sounds of mine must be rather like those planes that John says are always lining up over his house, except these planes aren't high, they're deep. I start to pant, and then, I suppose, I start to sing. John still doesn't stop doing what he's doing, but with his spare hand, he does reach up and lightly brush 2 fingers across my opening mouth. Those fingers slip inside me, and he hooks them against my lower teeth, and I understand. John is reminding me that the bedroom window is still open, and that the water may still be turning into a spray of diamonds above the flowers just across the way. But he isn't telling me to stop. He is telling me to keep going quietly. He is telling me I can signal to those waiting planes any time I want to and bring them in to land. He is telling me that nothing needs to stop me now, least of all myself. He is telling me that at last the sunshine and my throat and my voice are mine. Kneel, he says, not looking up from his work. Kneel. I come and just listen to the sounds that I'm making through John's fingers. Long, straying notes played pianissimo right up high on the neck of a double bass. They are wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Neil Bartlett. Thank you, Neil. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this evening's show/launch. Those of you who have joined us on Zoom, thank you. Thank you for joining us. You may now go. Those of you in the room, stick around. There are drinks to be drunk. There are books and revolutions to be plotted. Thank you very much. I have been Nathan Evans. He has been... Come and take a last bow, darling. Come on. He's been Justin David. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming and joining us. And good night.
Thank you. Thank you to all the writers. You were wonderful. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.